Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Painting with Picasso's Grapevine. My name is Leanna Haun, and I'll be your teacher and host for today. Today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about how to create depth in your painting. So what is depth? Depth I define as really kind of creating that almost two-dimensional, three-dimensional feel on your painting. So something a little bit close to realistic, but not hyper-realistic. So depth can be achieved in multiple ways. One of the very strategic ways to achieve this is really kind of creating highlight and lowlights. So how do you get that? Basically, you start out with three tones. You're going to have your mid-tone, which is your base color on your painting. Then you're going to create highlights by applying something lighter where the light would shine on the painting, and then complementing that with lowlights. So today I'm going to show you how to achieve that by using a painting that I love to do. It's called Blue Daisy. And we're going to start out with our list of supplies that we'll need for today. So we are using acrylic paint, as we usually do, and for today I have some cobalt blue, I have cerulean blue, I have black, white, and a little bit of metallic blue. So just wanted to throw in a little bit of fun highlights on there. I've included a little bit of burnt sienna. We'll be mixing that with the white to get to a nice cream color, but that's the colors we'll start out with. Today I have with me 4 paintbrushes. I always bring with me this tiny little paintbrush, and for today we're just going to really use that to sign our name at the bottom. And don't forget, you always want to sign your name. I'm going to start out with a very large paintbrush. Again, I'm choosing one that has a rounded edge. I believe this is number 12 filbert, but again, you choose what you feel comfortable with. I like a nice large rounded edge to work with, getting those broad strokes. Our next brush is something in between. Again, this is a number 6 filbert. Again, what I'm looking for is just kind of a nice medium feel of a brush, something that has a rounded edge. And then lastly, I have a nice tight, smaller paintbrush that has that nice crisp, very square edge, just for kind of adding some very detailed highlights. And I'm actually going to point out something. People very frequently think, oh gosh, if I start with this very tiny pointed brush, I'm going to get a nice flat, a nice light line. Be careful on your weight. If you press hard on this brush, you're going to get a fat line. So a lot of times, very deceiving, but if you work with something like this that has a very crisp, tight edge, turning it sideways, you can really achieve a nice light line using it more like a pencil. And of course, we always have our cup of water, so we can easily move and wash our paint out as we transition from color to color, and as well as our dab rag. So keep in mind that we're working with acrylic paint, so if we get a lot of water and we draw it and we let it draw down the canvas, it will remove that paint. It can be fixed, but you want to avoid it, and we avoid that by dabbing off on our rag as we transition color to color. So I'm going to start out with my very large brush, and I'm going to go ahead and dip this into the water. And what I'm doing here is just kind of laying out the example of the painting. So it doesn't have to be extremely tight. It can be very broad, but just deciding where am I going to place this on the canvas? What is it going to look like? So I start out with very broad strokes. Again, you don't have to draw it out specifically. People get very caught up in, I have to get the exact line. We're not worried about the exact line. We're just getting it out there. We're just making a symbol of, a hint of, just an idea of, hey, this is where it goes. And at the end of the day, you can move it. You can change it. You can decide what you want to do with it later on. So I've done that. Now, this is where I've got to start talking a little bit about those midtones. I started out with that cerulean blue, and I'm going to take it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take a piece of this, move it to the middle of my canvas, and mix it up with the white, just kind of lightening it up. Now people ask, should I mix on the canvas or should I mix on my palette? And the answer is, it depends on what kind of effect you want to go for. If you want more of a flat effect, then I would say go ahead and mix it on your palette, because you want to get the good color already mixed and then apply it to your canvas. If you want more of a streaky feel, then go ahead and work with those color combinations on your canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and start applying some of that color. Again, just moving up and down, kind of following the line structure of my painting. Now you're going to notice I'm going to have to continuously remix this paint, because if you don't mix enough, you're going to just keep on adding more. Now this is a very fluid paint, so I don't need to really worry about my palettes being off completely, because there's going to be a lot of depth and variation on that. If you need to keep a very consistent color, just think ahead, mix enough colors so that you don't have to lose that nice color that you already achieved with the first mixture. So again, just applying that to the canvas, I'm moving my strokes starting from the down up and moving upwards, letting it just kind of fly off the canvas. Now you notice, I'm not coloring it in like a coloring book. I'm just kind of keeping it in and around the areas, just kind of placing it out there. And then moving on to the next petal. Continuing with that upward motion. And I want this motion to follow the petal so it has a nice smooth feel. Continuing those strokes. Now you'll notice I just dabbed a little bit of white directly to that canvas. Gave it a nice streaky feel. That's cool. I like that. If you want that flat feel, don't mix on the palette. Mix on your on the canvas. Mix on your palette instead. So now what I would do is I would continue through this, kind of filling in those different petals that I placed on the canvas. Now, the motion isn't going to change, so this is something you would go ahead and complete. Now what I've brought with me today is another painting that I already started, same notion, just kind of for time's sake, go ahead and place that out there, just kind of let you see what it looks like. Now this is where I'm starting to introduce the depth. So people say, what goes first? Do you add the highlights? Do you add the depth? I always make the recommendation to start with your depth. And there's a phrase here that I use with all my students. I call it the flashlight effect. So if I had a flashlight and I was shining it on my canvas, where would the light fall and where would the shadows fall? And if you remember that imagery as you're continuing to place paint on your canvas, it's going to be easy to achieve that three-dimensional effect. So if you just visually go through and just say, hey, it's here, or if you decide it's going to be on top, then light is going to fall on the tops of the petals here, and the darkness is going to fall underneath. If your light, and I'm deciding that my light is going to shine from the top left, so my light is going to come through here, so this is where the light is going to fall, and this is where my dark or shadows are going to fall. So I went ahead, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of wash off our brush steer. I'm still working with this very large brush. I like the strokes on this, dabbing it off so I don't have a lot of water. And I'm going to move on into this cobalt blue, which is a little bit more brilliant. And you see, I've already placed a few strokes on here. Very, very quick. This is just a very quick stroke. I don't want to really mix it in. I just want to place it there and create the presence of, hey, here's the shadow. So as you can see, we've done that on each one of these petals just to create, hey, here's the shadow. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the center of this particular flower. Now it's a very vague center. It's very generic in nature. I'm going to be mixing white and black and just kind of creating the center. Starting off with the black and just dabbing it. Now something to keep in mind, I tell everybody, anytime we do any type of nature, any landscapes, things of that nature, do not make straight lines. There are no straight lines in nature. So you notice with my black, I'm not going to do a real strong, even curve across. I'm going to jump up and down and then create that very inconsistent feel of the center of the flower. So just going ahead and filling this all in, not worrying about too much any of the directions of the stroke. I'm looking for inconsistency. And this will become much more evident once I start adding in the white colors. So we just kind of get that towards the bottom, just fill it in. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with a little bit of my white here because I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the white and the black. I'm going to go pretty heavy. So I'm just creating some just very generic feels on and very heavy on the paint. Now, I don't want to create a very consistent gray tone. I want this to have depth and variation. So I've got two colors in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce and jump back and forth between the black and the white and just kind of break it up. And you see how you kind of get that really nice highlight and low light. Highlights and lowlights, that depth and variation is going to be present when you have the two very distinct colors just complementing, sitting right next to each other. So to get that, you've got to drop in some heavy paint. So this to me is starting to look good. You know, and another thing too, don't forget, step back from your painting. You cannot see your painting when you're right on top of it. Your eyes need to focus. So you need to actually take a step back, take a look, is my proportions right, before I move on. So I kind of feel good with the center of my beautiful little flower here. The next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and start adding some outline, some definition on the outside of the petals. So I've washed off the large brush, but I'm going to do that with my medium brush. So going ahead, getting a little moisture on that brush. You don't want to just start dry. And I'm going to move over and grab, again, some of this really, really brilliant blue. I'm just going to create some outlines. And if you have any troubles getting that paint to spread, simply add some water. It's really a nice technique. It acts as a medium. Again, careful, you don't want to add too much water because then you'll end up with a lot of drips. So we're just kind of setting it out there. Now you'll notice I'm letting these strokes go very broad. I'm just going to let them pass out the outside of the paint. And that's just the look I'm going for. Just kind of creating a very loose feel. Now, you'll notice too, once we started drawing this originally, we said, okay, there's going to be so many petals. And we went through, added some depth. Now I have to go through and now redefine where are those petals. And that's the thing you can remember. You don't have to define it at the very ending, at the very beginning rather. You can go through later, modify it, change it. So we're going through and we're kind of creating some very loose outlines on the petals, and deciding which ones are going to lay on top of which petals. And I do that by creating this very loose outline. So I'm saying, all right, this petal is going to lay on top. So that's cool. We're going to lay that outline. I'm going to let this petal sit behind that petal. And the first petal, we're going to go ahead and let that sit on top of the second petal. And just kind of continue that. It's a decision that you make as the artist, and that's the whole thing you need to remember as well. You are the decision maker. So if you want that petal to be inside on top in a different position, just paint over it. You can fix it. Now you'll notice too, I decided to use this nice brilliant deep blue as my depth. Very commonly people think that I just need to use white as my highlights and black as my undertone, as my shadows. Love that. Combine it though. I find it's very helpful to use in your highlights. You can use a combination of yellows and whites, and in your undertones a combinations of blues and blacks. So now I've got my definitions all laid out here. Now I'm going to add a little bit more depth and more brilliance. So a painting or this flower in particular, what it's done is it said, okay, here is the inside. These petals are reaching out. So let's kind of show how those petals are reaching out. To do that, you're going to create some depth reaching from the inside and moving out. And we're going to jump between that brilliant blue and that black. And that's what I meant by creating the depth through those combination colors. Just kind of jumping between the two and bringing that out and letting those strokes fly off. I see a lot of people who have stop and start motions in their strokes, and you lose the nice blending effect if you stop and start hard within your painting. So allow your paintbrush to just kind of flick off the canvas. This is very helpful in being able to achieve those nice blended feels. Now another thing I'll bring to your attention, you'll notice that the sizes of my petals, again, inconsistent. This is nature. Within my petals, I'm going to bring some of this highlight a little bit higher around the outside, a little bit shorter within the inside, but don't make them all the same length. So again, this is This is nature, and nature needs to be inconsistent. So kind of rounding it out, bringing the outside streaks up a little higher, and just kind of completing that all the way through. Again, you'll notice my strokes are not going straight up. They're, again, following the curve of the petal. This is to show that the petal is round. So you achieve that by creating round colorings, round dimension, and continuing that through. Now, the best way to show contrast is to be able to put lights and darks right next to each other. So let's go ahead and wash this out just a little bit. We don't want to have too much of the dark paint still in the paintbrush. And we're going to jump back over to that nice blended color that we made originally, that medium tone. We're going to blend a little bit on here. We're going to go backwards. So we're going to take some of those strokes and take them down. And it's okay if you end up dragging a little bit of that paint up on top. That's okay. Again, this is a very loose painting. If you want to go switch and move downward up, feel free. But what I'm doing here is I'm trying to create that variation within the petal. Again, the variation, dark against light, that's going to create that three-dimensional effect. You notice here, it just went a little bit dark here. That's all right. We're just going to cover that up and then carry it down. Again, keeping this very loose, and that's what's so nice about this painting. It is a very loose painting. Just kind of creating that very rounded effect. And then carrying that down. Again, starting from the inside, moving up. You can, it's okay if you move your stroke directions. You can start from up, moving down. You can start from the inside, moving up. That's what's nice. If you find that you have removed a little bit of that depth, that's what you got paint for. Grab some more of the blue, work within that bottom petal, move up, redefine any depth that you may have lost, and set it out there. Now, you'll notice too, I didn't worry about the insides of these petals because this is just a very generic, kind of broad, very messy kind of flower, which is awesome. We're not worrying about really tight edges, and that's what's very attractive about this painting. Now, remember I mentioned at the very beginning we had some really, really cool, very iridescent painting? This is just going to be fun. So what I'm going to do is kind of take this, and I'm going to place this where the light would go. So I'm going to place this on the top.